Hey, Purple Ella here and welcome back to my channel. This week I am doing my usual monthly video with the lovely Roz.
Oh.
And we are going to be talking this week about selective mutism because Roz, as a child, did experience selective mutism. So I'm going to ask her a little bit about that experience in case it's useful for those of you who have relatives or loved ones who are selective mutes. Is that right? Does that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, Roz, what age, what time period, age-wise, were you a selective mute?
So I'd say it was most of my childhood up until about the age of 15 or so. I never got an official diagnosis mainly because my family didn't really see it as a problem, and it was very accepted that I didn't speak to a lot of people. Or that I didn't speak in new situations.
So just to clarify, what did your selective, where would you talk and where wouldn't you talk?
So I talk to family in situations where I felt comfortable, and some friends. When I was younger I didn't have a lot of friends, but even some of my friends, like in junior school, my best friend was a school librarian, and we didn't talk a lot, we mostly did things together, and that was a lot more comfortable for me. So there were usually when I needed to communicate something that was more important to family or friends, that's when I talk.
So more sort of practical talking than conversational talking.
Yeah.
And so when you say up until you were 15, do you mean from when a child would typically start talking around the age of 18 months?
I'm not really. My mum doesn't have much memory of that time, and because she has 3 children, she doesn't really know much about. She doesn't really have a lot of memory about when it started to be noticeable that I didn't answer questions from when people asked me them. That I'd just stare at people. But she was always like, she always said that I was never shy as a child, and that was the difference. I wouldn't look down and look away from the person and kind of avoid them. I'd look straight at them and just not reply to a question like, how old are you?
Okay, interesting. And can you remember why you were choosing not to talk? Well, firstly, did it feel like a choice?
Sometimes it felt like a choice. It's really strange thinking about it, and I still have moments where it's just like, it's almost like I don't have the words to express what I'm feeling, or I don't think that it's necessary for me to use words to communicate with you. That's kind of how I felt when people would talk to me, and often I was like, the amount of effort it will take me to respond to this will not make it worth it. So, adults would often ask you how old you are, what your favourite subject was in school, and I was like, this is pointless, this isn't going anywhere. Just look at them, and it's like, I didn't really have that impetus to respond. My body didn't go, oh, now is when you speak. I was just looked at them and was just like, now is when you're looking at me, expecting something from me that I'm not sure if I want to give.
And did it make you feel uncomfortable that you weren't giving them what they were expecting from you? Or were you completely comfortable with it?
It depended on the situation and how the other person responded, I think. So most people are kind of, they get the picture that I wasn't going to respond and then move on. They're just like, oh, it doesn't really bother. If someone got really annoyed about it, that could get quite uncomfortable. But I also had some really good interactions that were, like, my godfather used to take me Christmas shopping every year, and most of that was silent on my part, but he'd fill in the silence and he'd talk, and then we'd do things together, and I really enjoyed that experience. And I felt like, it's the interesting thing about communication. People put so much pressure on the verbal communication, whereas I think a lot of communication can be done without verbal communication, and I didn't feel like verbal communication was my most comfortable way, and I still sometimes feel that way, and sometimes I have non-verbal moments, which we all do, and it's one of the things I think that people should do more, is let themselves experience the non-verbal moments between friends.
So I would find it really hard to communicate in a way that wasn't verbal because I can't have any level of physical contact with anyone outside of my immediate family. So when you talk about communicating in a way that is non-verbal, what does that look like?
I think it's different for everyone, but I also didn't do a lot of physical contact outside of my family. So it's like when my godfather would take me, so sometimes it'd be, us shopping together. So he'd show me things and be like, oh, do you want to get this for your mum? Do you want to get this for your sister? Like, where do you want to go? And I'd kind of guide where we went. And it's just more just letting silence be okay in some situations. So I would be a bit verbal if that was necessary to communicate something. But there are also, you can point things out, you can do things. My best friend, the school librarian, taught me how to knit. And we sat and knitted together. So it's like there's a communication that happens when you sit with someone and do something together. But it's not necessarily a communication that involves sharing experiences, but you're sharing the experience of sitting with someone. So it's different from how people communicate verbally, because they're like, oh, this information needs to be communicated. Whereas when you're doing an activity with someone, you're more just being like, we're sharing this moment, we're having this activity together. And people don't often see that as communication, whereas actually it's communication and connection. We're doing this together, and you can point out when someone does something, you can help someone without even talking to them, or you can point out something.
So would you say that being non-verbal at that time was because of your autism?
Yes, I think it was. I think it's linked with how I communicate, and the fact that
Would you like a puppy?
Words didn't come naturally to me, and social situations, like I used to observe a lot of social situations, and so most of my focus was on trying to figure out what was going on. So talking in that situation was an extra thing that I just was too much. So I think if I had spoken as a child, I wouldn't be as I wouldn't know as much about people, because that was my way of studying people. That was my interest, was people. So I think partially the non-verbal, the selective mutism was to aid me in my study of people, which is why when at 15 I decided that to study people more, I couldn't just read books and look at them, I had to interact with them. So I decided to learn how to do that. And I'd already been learning and been interacting more, but at 15 is when I kind of decided that I need to start interacting much more than I already had been doing. I needed to put an active energy into figuring out how to talk to people in various different situations.
Because I would say that my family are talkers.
Yeah.
Particularly my mum's side of the family, who I spent the most time with when I was a child. And even now, you sort of sit down to watch a film with my family, and there's a comment made every couple of minutes. They're real at the extreme end of talkers, which obviously is perfectly fine, but I think I took my social cue from that I had to talk.
Yeah.
And actually that's resulted in me being really overstimulated a lot of the time, and I'm, as you know, trying to learn now how to talk less. Mm-hmm. Not because I think talking less is necessarily a good thing, but because for me personally I feel like it's going to make my anxiety less.
Yeah.
So was it in any way connected with that as well?
Yeah, I think it was partially to keep... I didn't associate it, I didn't feel like an anxious child, but that's partially because I avoided a lot of things that made me anxious, and I kept myself... I tried to keep a level of self-control, and part of that was not talking, was not putting that extra stress on myself. And I think because I was stressed in a lot of situations, I was just trying to keep everything calm. So it'd be like, I can stay calm about all of this noise, about all of this, if I don't have to speak, if I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. I think that's something that I'm sort of feeling now, but I'm finding it really difficult to feel like I can do that without making other people feel uncomfortable, which is abhorrent to me. So moving on from that, sort of your experiences, if someone's watching this and they have a child, or they're working with an adult who is a selective mute, what would you say the best approach would be for them in communicating with that person?
I'd say finding things that they're interested in doing. Oh.
We're trying to stop the puppy from chewing the cable on the lighting, in case you're wondering why we're wrestling this puppy whilst doing this interview.
I think finding activities that you can do together that maybe don't require verbal communication is a really valuable thing, because sometimes things arise, verbal communication may arise out of that, just out of wanting to communicate something that you're while you're doing an activity. You can point something out. Being okay with it, like just being okay with the fact that someone's not talking, I'd say is really important, and respecting how they communicate and just trying to figure out how to communicate in a different way, which is quite challenging.
Would you say that sort of PECs, like picture communication cards and things like that, would have been useful to you at that age?
Yeah, I think possibly.
Because I think sometimes there's like a tendency towards children who are selectively mute with a normal IQ, feeling that they don't need those.
Yeah.
But I think there is still like a benefit to using them, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there is a benefit, and it's just about figuring out what the situations where they do benefit and where they're unnecessary. It's like, if there's another way you can communicate with someone who's not interested in using those, try that first. But also maybe give them a go and maybe say, let's just try it,
and maybe being okay with sort of pointing and the sorts of things that we might tell our children are rude.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're 15 and you start talking. Why?
Because I think at 15 that's the kind of point. I'd started talking earlier, but I think at 15 is the point where I actually made the decision that I needed to talk to more. So I'd started talking more to friends and family, and I did a lot of E. coli, like repeating things with my friends, and did a lot of... I used to ask everyone how they were all the time, because I didn't know how to start a conversation. So, and the way I knew how people started it was, how are you? How are you doing? Like, how's your day going? And my friends would get so annoyed, and they'd be like, I am fine. I am absolutely fine. You've asked me 20 times today. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know how else to start a conversation.
Yeah, I think I do that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. I don't know what else to... How else do you go in? Otherwise I'll go in with something really odd.
Yeah, really just off...
Like, did you know?
But because I didn't know how to do that, I just would go, how are you? How are you? How are you doing? So when I was 15, it's kind of the point in school where you can see the end in sight, and I was like, well, I don't know what that's going to be like. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how I'm going to be outside of this structured environment. And I actually am interested in people. And, I've been studying people for so long. I've been reading loads of books. There's got to be some benefit in what people do with social communication. There's got to be a benefit in that. People enjoy it. People get things out of it. Let's see if I can get these things out of it. And still for a while, my grandma and my mum would jump in and answer questions for me. And they'd be like, oh no, she talks now. She can answer for herself. But yeah, that's when I actively started being like, okay, try using this method of communication everyone else uses, and and it was still hard, and when I got in a situation where I felt was very new or uncomfortable, I still sometimes feel like it's just easier just to be quiet and just to assess the situation and just to figure out how I fit in. I think when I was younger, people used to say, Ros doesn't say anything unless it's important.
Which is no bad thing, really.
Yeah.
So, sorry, just to move you on a little bit, thinking about parents who might have children who are selective mutes, would you say, looking back on that time, that it would have been useful to have professional input and support, say from speech and language or from a paediatrician, or would you say that this whole sort of accepting neurodiversity and the different ways of communicating is the best way to go, and that actually you wouldn't change it?
I think for me, the fact that so many people accepted it was beneficial. It's how I've got where I am today. I think if your child is struggling, I don't see a problem in asking for help and asking for support. But if you can try and support them and within their environment, and get other people to understand, so communicate with other, try and communicate with the school that maybe actually non-verbal communication is okay. Maybe they don't have to answer your questions in school.
Or maybe there's another way for them to answer your questions.
Yeah, written down. I always did pretty well in school, so it didn't really bother my teachers that I wouldn't.
And
necessarily answer
Roz
them.
has gone on to get a good degree, so it certainly hasn't stopped you from achieving
And
academically.
now I work in customer service, where I talk to people all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, so maybe don't panic is one of the things to sort of take from
Don't
that.
think that your child is never going to speak, but also maybe they won't. Maybe non-verbal communication is the way that they want to communicate, and there's a book by a Japanese boy called
Oh gosh, what's it called? The reason I jump.
Yeah, The Reason I Jump.
And then he's written another one.
I haven't read
that I haven't actually read, but Mr. Purple ended up hearing it being read aloud on a radio station, and actually, even though this was a Japanese, so from a completely different culture, non-verbal, what you would probably say a completely different presentation of autism, I would say that Mr. Purple came away with lots of information from hearing that was relevant to his life with me and my presentation of autism.
Yeah,
So-
I read that book and I really just, like, it was so beautiful, and it made so much sense. It was the fact this non-verbal boy has this intense world, and that's how I felt. I had this intense world in my head, and I was making observations, but I just didn't.
That was enough for you.
Yeah, I couldn't communicate. I didn't want to communicate them. I was like, this is in my head. This is my world. This is enough for me at this point. And then later on, it was like, this isn't enough. I want to, like, share this. I want to be able to use language.
So maybe it's sort of that thing of, I think, as a parent, from the very get-go, it's, oh, is your child eating solids? Oh, is your child walking? Oh, is your child talking? And we're all, and then in school, oh, are they reading? Are they X, Y, and Z? And we're always comparing and expecting particular goals to be reached at particular ages, when actually, if you just support the child, they will reach those goals. So, just to wrap this video up, because it's probably long enough now, I would say that this has been really, really valuable and really, really useful. But if you have got any more questions for Roz about her experience as a selective mute, do leave me a comment in the comment box below, and you will check maybe and respond, and or we'll respond in next month's video to that. Do share this video, like this video, and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week. Bye.